Good afternoon or good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Debbie Matulowicz. I'm here at Sadlier, and I welcome back all of you who are regulars and say how much we so appreciate your being a part of our webinar series. And I welcome all of the newbies, if you don't mind me calling you. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your being a part of our webinar series and listening in on tonight's presentation. What I do want to mention is today's presentation is co-sponsored by Sadlier and an association called NACADAM. And NACADAM is the acronym for the National Catholic Association of Diocesan Directors for the Hispanic Ministry. Sadlier's been involved with various projects with NACADAM over the years, and this is the first time that we're co-sponsoring a presentation, and we hope not the last. Tonight, Lourdes Garza is bringing us a very rich presentation that we're just thrilled to be a part of. First, a little bit about the association. Let me introduce it to you for those that don't know it. First, you'll see the website at the bottom, ncaddhm.org. And the purpose of the National Catholic Association of Diocesan Directors is to affirm the reality of the Church in the United States in its rich cultural diversity and continue to promote unity in pluralism as an expression of our Catholicity. And in addition to that, to assist Hispanics in the process of integration into the total life of the Church and society. And as we all know, depending upon where we live and what our cultural mix is, sometimes that becomes difficult. And on your screen, you see the logo for NACADAM, the candle. There's two images, one a little bit larger than the other. And here's a little bit about the logo because it's such a rich explanation. I wanted to share this with you. The candle is the primary focus. It represents Jesus, the light of the world, as the center of our faith. The lit candle also represents the Hispanic community and a new vision of church that has emerged through the national encuentros. It is a vision rooted in both our histories and our faith journeys in the Americas. The light radiates throughout the Americas, for it is our hope and our challenge to see us as one church, one faith, the one body of Christ. The blue stained glass sky images depicts the diversity and the unity. The templo reminds us of the faith passed on by the abuelitos y abuelitas. And for those of you that don't know Spanish, abuela is a grandmother and a grandfather. Hope I have that right, Lourdes. But my daughter sometimes introduces me as her abuela because many of her friends' grandmothers are younger than me. I could kill her. But anyways, that's an aside, folks. Sorry to distract you there. But anyway, okay, let me introduce today's presenter, Lourdes Garza. She's the director in the Office of Hispanic Ministry in the Diocese of Knoxville. And while preparing for today's event, we had some really wonderful conversations. And for myself, it was humbling and enriching to hear some of the different paths that she's taken in her life and some of her experiences in the church as well as in her own personal life. Just very briefly, I'll explain. Lourdes was born in Mexico. She lived in California and eventually moved to Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, that's quite a variety of places with so many different experiences. And I can only think of, with this, is who would have ever thought that our own country is so different, no matter where you go. And there's such a large difference between Tennessee and California, let alone add Mexico. But she told me a funny story was that her children, and I'm sorry, I don't remember their ages, but I guess it was her son that finally said he's so used to living in Tennessee now, he finally says that he's from Tennessee instead of being a California boy. So I thought that was pretty cute. The next thing we're going to do is start with a prayer, and then we'll be starting our presentation. And the prayer, with our cultural diversities and the differences amongst each other, we also know that there are so many different events that go on in the world, and most recently the tragedies in the Philippines. So if you all don't mind reading along with this prayer for those recovering from natural disasters. Merciful God, the natural world is both wondrous and terrifying. It can tear away homes and neighborhoods and leave lost and bereft those whose lives have been upended. Such is the case now. Throughout the ages, people have turned to you in times of devastation and heartbreak. You turned your heart towards them and did not abandon them. Let your presence now be known by those who have lost so much in the face of this natural disaster. Bring them comfort and relief, and offer consolation in the midst of desolation. Make those of us untouched by this disaster mindful of their needs and generous in our response. In the rebuilding that must take place, draw us together in mutual love and support. In your gracious name we pray. Amen. And with the prayer, I just as a slight mention, and I don't have any of the details, but I know that the church, the bishops this week at their bishops' meeting, agreed upon, they're supposed to listen to Ms. Wu from the Catholic Relief Services and set up a committee on how the church will be supporting the devastation of the Philippines. All right, now with this, I'm going to be going over some housekeeping details, and then I'll be turning the controls over to Lourdes so she can begin the presentation, and you can sit back and enjoy the richness that she has to speak. For those of you who are familiar with our process, and those of you who are new, we do know that everyone is muted. You don't have to worry about background noises. The session is being recorded, so you'll receive a link to this recording, and you will receive an offer for a certificate of attendance. Now, I'm really behind in getting the certificate of attendances out, so I beg your mercy, I beg your forgiveness, and know that all of you who are still waiting, you will get them. Also on your screen, you can see a questions box. Please type your questions or comments here, and we will address them at the end of Lourdes' presentation. And right now, I believe we'll be turning the controls over. All right, Lourdes, I'll make you the presenter.
Okay.
And let's see here. Yes, on you. Okay, we're ready for you to show your screen and begin. Oh, there's those cute kids again.
Is everybody looking at my grandchildren?
Yes.
I'm clicking on there and it's not coming up.
On your PowerPoint? There you go.
Does the PowerPoint have to come up first?
Yes. Well, you could just open up your file.
The one that we did yesterday?
Yes. Or if you'd rather, I can go back and take the controls on my end, and you can just tell me when to advance.
No, it's right here.
You got it. Okay. Perfect. There we go. And
okay, everybody. Thank you for tuning in, I guess. And thank you to Debbie. She's been great support. I know that NACADM is very grateful to Sadlier for this opportunity to present this as part of our formation committee. We have been working very hard to bring information and try to get the assistant directors and people they work with in ministry several opportunities for advancing their knowledge in their field. And this is pretty much a generic area that hopefully will help a lot of people that work in what we now call share parishes. She's told you my name and where I work in my ministry. I'm also on the board of directors for NACADAM, and I represent the Episcopal Region 5, which is in the southeast. And I'm working on my last term, I think. I want to give special thanks to Father Hector Madrigal, who is like a mentor to me. He's in the Diocese of Amarillo in Texas. And this is really his material after I took his course 4 times in English and Spanish. So I think by now I should know it pretty well. I do present it in my diocese. I presented it to several parishes. I try to present it in both languages when I do it because it's important to see both sides of the situation here that we're going to be talking about. This is very general information that we need to know and be aware of, but it's not necessarily something that we're going to be applying to everything. So please be careful with that, no stereotyping. We are just trying to point out some things that might be helpful in your ministry as you work towards ecclesial integration. I think that a lot of the people that you're going to be working with who are children that were raised in the United States are sometimes going to be operating here or back and forth. And that's something to be careful because we're going to be talking about what's on the extreme left in the Hispanic, Latin, and maybe affecting some of the African Hispanics or even African Americans and people from the Caribbean. And then we're going to be talking about things that affect the people or concepts and values from the European descent Americans. So please keep in mind that when I refer to Americans, I'm talking about Americans from Northern European descent. So we're not talking about the countries with the Romance languages, which would be a different culture than the Northern Europeans. So the Northern European people are who founded the United States and brought their values more strongly. The other Southern European, let's say, came at the turn of the 20th century. So what founded and what has remained, it's that Northern European influence. We're going to be talking about things that are different in cultures, and one of the easiest ones to talk about is that many cultures, well, almost all cultures have a different concept of time. I'm going to talk to you about a few of them, and then if you have a few others, I would love to add them to this compilation, okay? We're talking about how people think about time, and then you can see how we can run into different situations where we're not operating in the same mode or even the same time frame. We tend to think that in Spain, people think of time as el tiempo pasa, and that means that time just goes on, it takes its time, it's going to happen, and so we just go with it. And a lot of Hispanics, of course, have that Spanish influence. In England, the term for the time concept is, the concept of time, I'm sorry, is time runs or time flies. Germany, time marches on. I think you want to see that again. There you go. In Japan, time works, and they're always working to make things effective. They take 21 years to consider that they've done something well. Time works. So they take their time in doing things well. Vietnam's a little bit like Spain, where time is elastic. You know, it takes the time to do whatever it takes to do. So if you thought it was going to take 2 hours, it's going to take 3 hours, it's okay. And the last one we have is what we have in our American culture that most of you are already probably thinking about, is time is money. Very valuable concept. Okay, if you know of any others, I would really appreciate if you let me know because it can add to our knowledge about other cultures. We're going to be talking briefly about 3 groups and some of the values that exist in those groups. For instance, in the Hispanic or Latino community or descendants of Hispanics, the values always express relationship between the members. That is, from member to member, and that's kind of similar with the African American. If we put this in a meeting situation, and you probably have seen it, is that when the meeting is about to start and Hispanics arrive, they will greet everybody by shaking hands, and if they know them, already know them well, it might be a shake, an embrace, and a kiss, and they will greet every single person that they can. They'll give their name, and they don't want to start the meeting or get going, and they're worrying about who is not there and why they're not coming. And sometimes when there's meetings with only Hispanics, they will wait till everybody's there to begin the meeting. That does not sit very well with American culture. The meeting starts at a certain time, and you get going no matter who's there or who's not there. So you could already see a difference there, I think. They make sure they meet everybody, and it's important. So we'll see some other things like this in a little while. Okay, so we'll see in what we usually used to call the Anglo-Saxon or European descent Americans. The meeting situation, somebody might come in and say hi, hello, good evening, and they are addressing everybody with one word. And this is okay. This is the cultural tradition for European descent Americans. That's okay. Okay, their concern will be if the meeting was well prepared, if there's an agenda, if everybody's running on time, or they're running ahead of time, or we're really going to be done on time. Okay, and then just very shortly, we're going to talk about Asians very shortly, but because we're really concerned that our Vietnamese Catholic population is growing. For instance, we already have here in Tennessee a mission church that started with 300 people. And they're going to be, we're going to be dedicating their church this coming Sunday. So we're very happy about that. So I'm going to be looking at this more so that I can help other people understand that. But their values are from member to the group, and they don't usually greet you by shaking hands. It will be more of a nod or a bow, and it's a form of respect for them. So there's really nothing with touching or shaking hands. Some of the things that we can see in, and we're going to start looking at the cultures, not just the Hispanic Latino culture, but two important principles to look at is we tend to think of ourselves and actually the culture itself as two parts. If you can imagine an iceberg, and we're going to be talking about this in the next page as well. If you can imagine an iceberg, we only see the top of the iceberg. So we only see what's above the surface, and that is the identity of the person. Everybody can probably do different things that we list under that part of the iceberg that we're going to see in the next page. I'm sorry. And I'll give you an example. But below are the values, how people think, and unspoken rules about their culture. Okay, so if we look at the next page, and I apologize because you might not be able to read all the little writing, and I'll tell you where you can get that handout because we couldn't provide it to you right now. And I don't know how much you can enlarge that. But we're going to look at things that are above the iceberg, and that would be above, I'm sorry, the surface. That would be things of the identity such as fine arts, literature, drama, classical music, games, folk dancing, cooking, notions of modesty, and conceptions of beauty. So these things can be adapted to where you are, a particular part of the world. You can adapt yourself to learn those notions in that part of the world. These things are interchangeable. And by the way, you can find this iceberg theory in the internet really easy. All you have to do is Google iceberg theory of culture. You'll find several handouts, and you'll find several concepts of this. So one example would be, for instance, we're about to celebrate Thanksgiving, and guess what? Not everybody's going to have ham or turkey. You know, they might have tamales. They might have rack and lamb. I don't know. Not everybody's going to have dressing or stuffing. They might have just bread or tortillas and no yams. What's important is about that we're going to be celebrating Thanksgiving. And that's okay. That's the part where food is okay. We adapt to that very easily. That part is in there, cooking and food. And that's probably why we love all the cooking shows, because we get to see how other people eat and what they put in the food. However, talking about what we eat, when we look at the values below, which is the values and thinking and spoken and the rules, we might find ourselves saying many times, what are you doing? Okay? Well, so what's written in those itty-bitty tiny letters is, for instance, child raising notions, courtship practices, approaches to problem solving, nature of friendship, ordering of time. There's the time again. How do we do the agenda? And we'll talk about, a little bit about that later. Notions of adolescence and facial expressions. Body language that we interpret in this country might be totally interpreted differently in another country. So relationships to animals. Talk about eating. India, they don't need cows. We have many different kind of animals that we consider pets, and maybe other people wouldn't have as pets. And many other parts of the world eat things that we wouldn't dream of eating. That's what we will find ourselves saying, what are you doing? Now the things below the surface, those are very hard to change. They're very ingrained in our own particular cultures. So that's where we might run into a little bit of trouble understanding each other, understanding other cultures. Okay, for Hispanics, one of the things that is a value or something very ingrained is interdependence on each other, especially people that come from Mesoamerican culture heritage and a lot of parts of Mexico and some of the other indigenous nationalities. What happens is that it's a very strange notion that is there that tells the person that I see myself in others. Okay, so when they look at another person, they think to themselves, you are my other self. Okay, I also see myself in those who are doing well. The notion is, I am you, you are me, and we're all the same. Okay, that is something that we have to deal with because we have a lot of people that come from indigenous areas. We have a lot of people from Guatemala that probably are very ingrained in this notion. We have a lot of people that are indigenous from Mexico that are in the country now that are probably living this notion as well. But what happens with that is that when we look at others and they do something differently, for instance, that's below the surface of the iceberg, we tend to think that if we wouldn't do that, then that's wrong. Okay, that's something that's in the culture that I'm not going to say that is incorrect or not. That's just the way that the culture functions. Okay, so we tend to judge others on whether they have good character or bad character, depending if they have these values of dignity, respect, warmth, love, and trust. Okay, and what happens is we call that having good character. In Spanish, it's called la buena educación, which literally means good education, but I think it's more like good upbringing. So when they look at other people doing things that are kind of strange, you know, that one might keep them away. You might probably thinking of some situations in parish life where you have tried to bring Hispanics in. I'll give you an example. For instance, having a wedding and a reception where children are not invited, and it's plainly so in the invitation. No children, please. Okay. That interdependence that we talked about earlier, about everybody being together, we're all the same. The children are the same as the parents. We're all a family. We're one. That would be considered something very strange to Hispanics, that they might even consider bad character, because how it's kind of like, how dare you not invite the children? They're part of us, you know. So you usually see everybody going everywhere together, the whole family, and that's where that part of that comes from. But the other notions, we're going to talk about also about good character and bad character. Let me turn the page, excuse me. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples in other cultures. You know, body functions are considered differently in different cultures. In Hispanic culture, there's some body functions that are not acceptable, where in the American culture they are. I don't want to go into details, maybe you can think of some. Okay, child rearing, for instance, again, the whole family being together and going everywhere or not going anywhere if the family's not allowed. Whereas in America, we're used to, having a babysitter stand by all the time, and if the children are invited, fine. If the children are not invited, that's okay. That's part of the child rearing, but there's other notions. Sleepovers is a big problem with Hispanics, where it's a big part of the culture in the United States, but it is not something that is considered appropriate or safe for Hispanic children because they should be sleeping at home. That's the major thing. Why do you want to sleep somewhere else? And there's other safety regards. Another one will be dealing with the aging, and we see that a lot where, I'll give you an example. I was approached by our senior center here locally, and they said they wanted to have programs for Hispanics, but there weren't any senior citizens. And at the same time, there was someone that was doing a project in the farms with children taking pictures. And some of the pictures, they show the, like Debbie said earlier, the abuelita, the grandmother, cooking dinner for all the farm workers coming home for lunch. So I was able to tell her, it's not that they're not around here, it's just that they're still working. They're either still working or they're living at home and helping as one of the members of the family. There's not that leisure time in the daytime. Surely as they become more integrated into the American culture and the longer they've been in the United States, maybe that notion eventually takes over. But if the recent arrivals of the been here first generation, we're not going to see much of that. You're going to see grandparents living at home with one of their children and grandchildren. And we also see that, tend to see that a lot in the Asian culture. We all know that due to our independence traits in the United States, that's not traditionally what happens. Older seniors are independent. They're out on cruises. They're out living their retirement. They're in retirement homes, or they're in homes for adult living. So it's a very different example there are we talking about. Okay, so now we have some values for the American culture. And there are 4 that we're going to talking about. And again, I want to stress that we're generalizing. But I think one of the most important ones that we have seen lately is the rule of law. We have seen that a lot with this, with the health insurance situation right now. We're seeing that a lot with the immigration law. We hear a lot of people that are not for immigration reform because why should there be a break in the law? The law is such, and why should we change it? And I always tell people that, as I remember my 8th grade government classes and my college government classes, the people make the law, so we can change the law in that. That might be putting a little bit of, I might be putting a little bit of personal opinion there, but the rule of law is very important in the United States, and it's a good thing because it assures order. The other one is time, and we already talked about time is money, but we also hear things like we can't waste time. Time is an enemy. If it's running too fast, we're not getting things done. And we also hear time is of the essence. Okay, well, we might run into a little bit of trouble here at the time with the 2 cultures, is that Hispanics have a little trouble with this, if to say the least. But when I teach this in Spanish, I overstress that in many of the classes that I've gone for Hispanics, many of the conferences. We are trying to teach that what life is like in the United States and how important this value is of being on time. You can't get to a meeting 15 minutes late when the agenda is already going and want to say hello to everybody by interrupting the meeting. At that point, it's considered interrupting the meeting, and you're going around shaking hands and making sure that you know who's there and hugging people. You have to come in quietly and go on with the agenda. And sometimes this being late is considered an insult by other people, and it could hurt a relationship that could be formed down the line. So don't despair that we're not teaching this. On the other side, on the Hispanic side, we're trying to do our best to teach that. The other concept is individuality, and we are this is what has assured our rights and freedom and respect. There's also respect for personal space. I think we're the only country that has declared that we have a 6-foot diameter space bubble. And whenever I tell people that, they always laugh and they look at each other, okay? But we always talk about being at an arm's length or 2 steps behind or in front of another person, you know, not invading that personal space. What's important too is independence and individual achievement. I have trouble with that when I talk to parents in parenting classes, Hispanics, and they tell me the kids are learning to be too independent when they're teenagers. And first of all, I make them aware that the kids are attending the public school system in the United States, and they learn independence from kindergarten. And most of you will remember the little angel that could. You will remember little Johnny Appleseed that went throughout the country and planted seeds. So I don't think any one of those two, neither the little engine or little Johnny, had permission from their parents, never mentioned. And so the kids naturally are going to grow up with this sense of independence, and that's going to cause a clash down the line in the Hispanic homes because they're interdependent and everybody works together, and adult children are expected to ask for permission to do very many things. So just so you can see the contrast there. The other value is success. And success in the United States is very based on Protestant religious culture. And that would be that it's a blessing of God, and that is why I'm successful. That is why I'm rich. The poor did something wrong, and that is why God is punishing them. It's unfortunate that this has taken over the country, and that's where you see these people that are multi-millionaires, and we see people that are still trying to figure out how to get food on the table. Pope Francis is really challenging us to deal with this in more in the recent days, and as a matter of fact, he has declared a day of prayer for end of hunger on December 10th. You'll probably get some information through your contacts on that. It was very interesting to me that a few years back in our area here, there was a prayer groups that were formed in the Protestant church, and it was very popular, and they were all based on the prayer of Jabez. And to me, I got sucked into it. It's like, what is this prayer? I want to know what it is. It's 2 verses from the Bible, and I contrast that with Our Father, and you will see the difference. We also, below that, we're recommending that, Father Madrigal recommend that if you want to read any further information on American culture, there's a book called The American Way by Alan Carlson. If you want to take time to write that down, or you'll get it on your recorded copy. If you didn't get the information, please write us a question. So what is the prayer of Jabez? Here it is. So I'm going to read it to you so you can see how this fits into the American culture. Jabez was the most distinguished of his brothers. His mother had named him Jabez, saying, I bore him with pain. Jabez prayed for the God of Israel, oh, that you may truly bless me and extend my boundaries. May your hand be with me and make me free of misfortune without pain. And God granted his prayer. Okay, these 2 verses made a whole Bible teaching. There were books published on it. You can look them up in the internet. And see how the verse 10 stresses me, I, mine. Okay, so when I contrast about how we pray to God and the Our Father, it's about ours and us, community. So in the Catholic Church, we don't tend, you know, there's a contrast of the Protestant Church and the Catholic Church. It's about us, about community. I just wanted to throw that in there. Okay, now we're going to get into the decision-making process, and there's 4 steps that have been related to this, and we're going to give you the order of how they happen for Hispanics, and then we're going to give you the order of how those 4 steps happen for Americans, and then we're going to look at what happens when we compare those 2. Okay, when we're asked, I guess I'm going to be again talking to you about maybe a meeting situation where people come together to form a committee to work on a project. So the person that is a Hispanic descent person is going to, these are the steps he's going to take. He's going to make the decisions from his heart. Do I put this all my heart into it? Do I really want to do this? This is something that I'm really going to put all of myself to it. Okay, so it's going to be a decision about what relationships am I going to form with the other persons that are going to be working with me, with the organization. You know, especially with Father. Am I going to get to know him better? Is he going to get to know me better? Do I matter to him? Okay, and maybe he'll move on to the next point or not, depending on how much he feels that he really belongs there at that moment in that organization, in that group, in that church. So that's the first step. And the second step, he's going to want to understand what's being expected of him. You know, am I going to have to give you 3 hours a week, 4 hours a month? Am I going to have to be here every Saturday? Is it a thing about cutting grass? Is it all the grass? Or are we going to build a shed? How many sheds? You know, how many hours? I need to understand what I'm going to be doing, okay? And then in the integration part, he's going to evaluate, is this something that I should be doing or not? Is this good for my family? You know, I'm going to be away from my family, but I'm going to do something good for the church. So I'm going to be doing something good for the community. That includes my family. I have to look at the whole situation, okay? And if it's not going to do that, they will just say no, okay? And if they don't feel secure that they're going to do this, sometimes they might just simply disappear or never get back to the organizing group, which is not a very good thing, but maybe they don't want to face having to say no face to face, okay? After going through those 3 steps, the person is going to make a decision. Yes, I'll do it, I'll commit, okay? So there's the 4 steps, and the other 4 steps are also in the American culture. They're just in a little bit different order, okay? So for the Hispanics, the outcome of getting involved and going through this process is that they feel like they belong, and they're part of the organization. The church embraces them, takes them in, and there's an interdependency, and it's all relational. They belong to something, they belong to this organization, and they're going to be learning from that and moving on. Now at this point, we want to remind you that integration process is very slow, and it could take up to 3 years for a newcomer to feel like they're really welcome and involved. And that's because they have all these apprehensions. And most important than all, there needs to be a trust established between the parties so that they can proceed and be full members. And that would be whether they were here or they were in their own country. That's just the nature of the culture. For the European descent Americans, the first step is understanding. Okay, Father, we're going to do this project. Okay, or the chairman of this board or this organization. What do I have to do? Is there a job description? You know, how long is this going to take? Where are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? How long is it going to be for? I need to know all that first before I make a decision. Once they have all those pieces together, they move on to decide yes or no. And you might be no and take me off the list. Don't call me about this again. I don't want to get involved with this again. It's a very direct, very fast decision. And integration, you know, they might tell their family this happened, this didn't happen, or I'm going to be in this group, I'm going to be working with these people, we're going to be, you know, the person might just say, I'm going to be doing something different every Saturday morning at church, and that's the end of it. As a matter of fact, what might happen down the line is, let's say that Jose gets involved in this organization with Ed and on this project, and they decide that they're going to be the ones that are going to cut grass for 6 months, the first months of the year, every Saturday, take care of all the lawns at church. And then maybe a year goes by, and Jose runs into Ed, and Ed is with his wife at Lowe's or Home Depot, and Jose comes up and says, hi, Ed, how are you? How's everything going? And then I say, excuse me, you know, he might not remember who he is. And then Jose might say to his wife, well, we worked together for 6 months in church, remember? And the wife might not know anything about it. She has no idea that happened or not, you know, and that's because of the interdependence. And I'm not saying any of this is on the negative side. We're just talking about what is, and we're trying not to stereotype. Generalize, please. Okay, so the 4th part would be what I just referred to. There might be an relationship that was created accidentally from this. It's not really planned. I'm not getting involved so that I'll have more friends. It doesn't really matter to me. I know where I stand with the church, whether I do this or not. I'm secure in who I am. So it's not an important process of the participation or the reason to do it. So here we go. We put them side by side. And so when we're trying to work all together for the sake of working together in the parish, this is what happens. Okay? What's the most important thing on the Hispanic side is not as important on the European side, European descent side for Americans. Okay? It's not bad or good, that's just the way it is. And what the movement, which is the decision, making the decision, that is the second step on the right side here, is the last part on the left side, on the Hispanics. So what most likely would happen, let's say that you have a meeting to set up who's going to do what, and Jose is still thinking about going through all this process and going home trying to make a decision, and has left the meeting, and people in the meeting already made the decision. They meet together for the second time. Jose hasn't made this decision by the second time. So on the second time that they meet, the rest of the team figures Jose is not interested because he's not showing up. He's not telling them what he wants to do. So they go on with the project. They meet a third time. Jose shows up with all excited because he's ready to go. And when he gets there, all of a sudden, everybody's already working, and nobody asked him. Nobody took him into consideration. And that's not really so. That's not really what happened. We're looking here. We can compare across, and we can see that's not what happened. So both sides need to know how this works when you're going to make decisions. Both sides need to make allowances. The Hispanic side, for instance, needs to understand this is not about making friends. This is about doing a project together. This is about working on a program that we have here at the church, something like that. And maybe the other side, the American side, needs to make time for people to make up their mind. And let me go into this really fast, and we're almost done. Here are some visual aids to think about, the culture, how it comes together. What binds us together as Americans is we used to use the visual of a magnet because we have a common vision. We have bylaws. We have the agenda, the date, the time, the place, the schedule. The building is very important, what happens to the building. All those things are important, and we all work together that way. And for Hispanics, Latino culture, what binds us together is a chain link kind of a thing, because we always check to see if everybody's there. We're protecting everybody. We're looking to see why they're not there, and that interdependence is shown there. For the Asian culture, again, we put a little bit of in there. And you talk to one person, and it moves the whole community. All are members, and there has to be our harmony among them. So it's also some kind of interdependence working there, and I would have to be looking into that a little bit more. I'm just giving you a little bit that I learned. So again, I just want to stress that this information is just one instrument to help us learn how to work better together towards ecclesial integration, and that it's not intended for all peoples. It's not intended to be something that, that it applies to everybody that you know. You can't look at a person and say, oh, whatever. But it's very general, what might happen and what you need to be aware of. And I want to make you aware of some challenges that might answer some of your questions already. The challenges we have is to get out of our comfort zones. We need to get out and know people from other cultures. In Spanish, we use a phrase that is very common, and it's called gente puente. We need to be those bridging people. That's what gente puente means, those bridging people that bring people together. If we're aware of all this, and then we want to go out and learn more about it, we're going to be those people that are going to be making our new Vietnamese parishioners, our new Korean parishioners, our new Hispanic parishioners welcome into the church, because we're aware of some of the things that are important to them that eventually will make them realize what's important to us. One of the things that I have in my notes from Father Madrigal, he said, live the passion of being part of the human family of God. And I think that's really, that we have to go at it with a passion. And just to close before our final prayer, before we're going to take questions and then we'll do a final prayer, is Pope Francis on his address to the Brazilian bishops that were youth said, what is needed is not unanimity, but true unity in the richness of diversity. And that's it before we do our prayer.
Thank you so much. This is absolutely terrific. And as you were speaking, I was thinking of a lot of the different situations in my own parish. And it resonated, I did very clearly. Before we go to the questions, would you please talk about the border decoration on your slides?
Okay. I feel that when I was looking at what I was going to, how I was going to present this PowerPoint presentation, I was very careful to make it very Hispanic because it comes from my office. I was a Hispanic ministry, and it comes from academia as well. And so when I saw that border on the side, on the right side, it really talked to me about all the colors of the image of Our Lady Guadalupe, you know, with the mantle and the pink dress and the flowers, the white flowers. They're not the same kind, but there's white flowers there as well. And then the larger screen, you know, I thought of something that reminded me of tiles, of roof tiles in Mexico and Texas, and of pots, of flower pots. And so that's what some kind of a subliminal message is there.
Thank you. Yeah, it is, and it's absolutely beautiful. Adding to your comment about time that you had mentioned earlier, Sherry wrote, and this isn't a question, it's just to add to the conversation. Sherry added some other proverbs. In Estonia, the Estonian proverb, wasting time is stealing from oneself. A Japanese proverb, time waits for no one.
A Japanese is what?
A Japanese proverb, time waits for no one.
There you go.
And then an Arabian proverb, time is the master of him who has no master.
I might have to get this from you later because I can't write
I'll definitely share that with you. Okay, now we can go into some of these questions because we do have several. Joan asked, how do we get Hispanic families to attend Mass weekly, not when you want your child to receive a sacrament?
I really believe that people really have to be evangelized before they're catechized, and sometimes we take these baptismal classes, that has been my experience, and we want to catechize people. We make them take 4 classes because we would think we're going to catechize them, and you know, sometimes it works, but there needs to be evangelization first. If they don't know who the Lord is, they're not going to be worried about coming to visit him every week. They're not going to worry about being there. So it's a one-on-one approach and maybe an interview process at the beginning to see where people are at. And what some of the parishes have done, I've said, you know what, you need to be coming to Mass at least 4 weeks before we baptize a child so that we know that you're serious about the faith and you know that it really means that you're going to bring the child up to faith by example. So maybe in those 4 weeks there can be a retreat coming up or something where they can have that encounter, that evangelization encounter, that encounter with Jesus where they can have that, their life is converted, and then they're going to be very anxious to baptize their child. And it's a big problem. We understand that it's a huge problem, and we also have in the Hispanic community your CEs, what is a CE, Catholics? You know, Christmas and Easter, we also have those, but we can add Our Lady Guadalupe to that.
Oh, funny. Okay,
yeah.
All right, thank you. All right, how do you promote a mutual knowledge between the Anglo-Saxon culture and Hispanics?
Okay, well, whoever asked that question, you've taken the first step today. The next step would be to have your Hispanics listen to the presentation in Spanish, and then maybe sit together and see how this really fits your situations. And you know, if you're talking about events that you want to do in the parish, the best events you can do is sitting down and eating together, sharing a meal, you know, parties, having situations where you have a party quote-unquote situation where you're not coming together for a conference, you're not coming together for a bilingual mass, but you're coming together just to share being with each other, fun stuff, picnics, things like that. And once you form those relationships, they'll want to come to other things, I think.
I think so. As a matter of fact, as an example, at my own parish, we have an international day where it's an outdoor festival. It's in September every year. And a little bit about the parish, the neighborhood I live in, it's at least 85% Latino. And so our parish grounds are tables and food from every South American country you can imagine, and the islands, and dancers. The dance groups that the children are growing up and learning to learn the tradition, even though they're here in the United States, to learn the tradition of their native culture. It's a full day, and they have what they call the Italian table. Even though the Italian table is Italians and Polish nationality, and I'm trying to think of the Yugoslavian people too. So it's kind of funny, but it's quite a day of celebration, and it's a celebration of culture that makes up our entire church. Let's see, how do we get? Oh, let's say we asked that one. I'm sorry. This one I'm not too sure of the meaning, and Lourdes, I'm hoping you understand it. Father Juan asks, how do we promote Latinos to come outside the darkness? Does that make sense?
Well, we have this huge thing called immigration reform that we're working on, and hopefully that will be resolved soon. I've seen the flourishing of the DACA recipients, the excitement that they've called me with to tell me that they got their license, that they're enrolling in school, that they're participating. They have that little safety net now. We know that we don't know how long it's going to last, but that can also happen in the security of the parish when people are accepted as they are, and that's never, that is never a question, whether assuring them that in registering in the parish, that information is not going to be shared. Assuring them that one of the phrases that I don't like to hear ever is when I go to a parish and they tell us they don't let us borrow their rooms. And I tell them, is this your parish? Yeah, then why are you borrowing anything? It's really yours. You're asking for permission to use it. You're scheduling yourself to use it. But that tells me where things are in that parish when they're asking to borrow a room. So that means they're not integrated, they're not there, they don't feel welcome, they feel like the strangers. That were back in the days where Hispanics met in the basement of the church only, or were charged a fee for it. So coming out of the darkness has to do with building a trust, building a sense, getting to know the people, getting to know them. If you want to reach out to them, it's getting to know their family, welcoming them, learning their names, things like that will have to come out and be more, participate more, I think. I don't have all the answers, okay? I'm just trying from my experience. I did work parish life 12 years, and thank God for that. That was my training period.
Well, it's still though experiences, but we all, like going to the school of hard knocks. Okay. Yes. This one is, what do you have to say to to a diocese that has a call for unity and diversity, but does not include European descendants?
No, that's not right. That's not right. As a matter of fact, one thing that I wanted to indicate as what do we do from here is our own USCCB Culture Diversity Office faced that problem. We had a conference back in Notre Dame where they had 5 different parts that they serve in their office, and at that particular conference they called them. We set up the groups as families, and the European descent Americans reclaimed, what about our family? And they made room for them. and their input was included, and from now on, they're always included. You know, culture is not everything, how can I say? When we talk about color and cultures, white's a color too. So we need to include everybody. There needs to be a sensitivity to that also.
Okay.
You know, when we do our Marian Mass, when we do our traditional Hispanic Marian Mass, that we include all the different Marian images of all the Latin American countries. We include United States, which is Immaculate Conception, and we include Our Lady of Czestochowa because that's our bishops. That's who he honors in his culture as a Polish descendant. So we need to be very careful, very sensitive to that. It should not be excluded.
Okay.
That's part of who we are.
Yes, and thank you. And thank you for mentioning the Bishop's Committee on Culture. And I know that if you go to their website, you'll find the committee action and the reports and suggested ways to implement different activities within your parish or within your diocese. There are several questions. Now, this is interesting because I'm going to try grouping them together because we're down to the last 5 minutes. But in addition to cultural differences because of nationality, I'm going to give you a few different situations. One is where the child wants to go to Catholic school and follow the Catholic faith, but the parents are atheists. Another situation takes in the whole community. It talks about age, the cultural differences in a parish because of age differences. How do you build relationships that way?
Well, there's a lot of communities that are trying to build, adopting grandparents that tutor kids, and that's a way to bring the elderly and probably the founders of the parish to look at the future of the parish, and you can have like after school programs where a lot of these people that have so much life experience can give some of their time or at least offer them the opportunity to do that and make them feel needed, and the ones that need them is the new and the younger generations. So there's a lot of treasure there where, we talk a lot about a whole community catechesis, and we talk a lot about including everybody, and we have to find ways to do that. We have to find ways to do that. We can't just have mass times for different people. We need to have masses where everybody's welcome to all the masses. And I think those are some of the suggestions. I don't know about the Catholic school in atheists. That's a little bit more difficult to figure out. That's a big challenge, why the parents make that decision. It's very interesting that that's happening there. Or are we talking about non-practicing parents? I mean, I know in the parish where I was in California, our pastor made it very well clear that the Catholic school was not a private school, and if your child was in the school, you were expected to attend Mass every week. And we would check envelopes. Believe it or not, we would check envelopes. And he was very gracious. If you were going 50% of the time, he would give you a break. But if you weren't, he would raise your tuition. He did that, and to take away the notion that this was a private school. It's not a private school, it's a religious school with a Catholic tradition. So I don't know if that applies, if that's what we're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. That is a difficult answer. Yolanda wrote, and to share an experience, she said that in working, in my experience, working with Hispanic in my parish, the pastor and the deacons need to understand the culture in order to have good integration. That is so true.
Okay, well, that's where the USCCB comes in, where your parish council perhaps needs to look at that page again and see that the USCCB Cultural Diversity Office is aiding us in obtaining intercultural competencies, and they have a program for building intercultural competence, and they're doing these trainings for ministers regional-wide. Unfortunately, I went in there, and the last training they had posted that took place in October, Perhaps they're going to be posting the ones for 2014 soon. And at this training, I took it myself in Miami, you are trained on how to work with all these different cultures and how to, close those gaps and address the situations in a very good way. And how do you can bring this to your region, to your deanery, or to your parish? So there is an answer coming on the way, and we just, one of the best things that we find out about people that want to help with the immigration reform is to know the face of immigrants, to know that this is not about papers, it's about people. So once you get to know people on a personal basis, a lot of times your attitude changes about other cultures.
Mm-hmm. Very true. I know we are at the 8 o'clock hour, and the presentation is 1 hour. There's one question that Sister Gloria wrote that I would like to address it if you don't mind, and then right after that we'll go to the closing prayer and one announcement. I hope you all don't mind, but it's pretty relevant. How do you bridge the communication gap between parents and third-generation children when the parents want the children to participate in Sunday worship in Spanish, but the child no longer feels comfortable or speaks the language fluently?
In a Hispanic culture, the children will remain with the parents, and that's, in the aim of keeping those values. I think we need to respect that, and the children, I think the children will not lose the language. They can still understand, and in order to keep that family united and keep that family together, I think it's important that we encourage that and try to help the kids to understand how important that is. If they're not really getting anything out of it, then the parents the parents always need to be encouraged to learn English, okay? But the masses are two different styles, too, that the parents might not want to give up attending their mass in Spanish. So I think that we need to understand better what that family dynamic is there so that it stays intact, and there's not that separation of people going to two different masses.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All righty. Okay, we'll go into the closing prayer.
Okay.
And then after that, then I'll take a closing. Okay.
I can't change it. I think it's already. Yeah, I can't get my last slide.
Let me see. Oh, you know what? If you get rid of the bottom, I can. Let me see. I think I have.
Okay, there. I got it.
You got it? Okay.
If you all want to say with me this short verse that is very familiar with you, and I hope it brings a different meaning to your life, just like Debbie shared with me. We are many cultures, but we are one faith, one bread, one body, one Lord of all, one cup of blessing which we bless, and we the many through the world, we are one body in that one cup. Thank you very much for listening.
Okay, and thank you, everybody. I do thank you for staying on with us just a few minutes longer. I am going to switch over to this announcement. Let's show my screen. Sorry. Next week on Wednesday, Bishop Ricardo Ramirez is going to be presenting 2 webinars in English at 1 p.m., in Spanish at 3 p.m. Every year is a year of faith. It's quite an appropriate way to end the year, and to end the year of faith, which will be ending in November. And you will receive an email sent with the invitation to register for this event. If you don't know him, he's very delightful, very heartwarming, and you'll truly embrace everything. And that ends our presentation. Thank you on behalf of Sadlier, on behalf of Nakadam, and Lourdes and myself for being with us today. And God bless, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much. All righty. Good night.
Good night.